Welcome back. I'm Hannah, if you could call mine in, and I've been doing some deep soul healing work and created a fun term to that end, Enoughness Deficit Disorder, or EDD. You are called to powerful and effective leadership. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. And one of the things that I'm learning that compromises my self-leadership is enoughness deficit disorder. EDD directly, negatively impacts every aspect of our lives every day. That can be in relationships, it could be in how we show up, in who we are, and so many other aspects. So far, we have determined that the three foundational truths of enoughness are, number one, that we are loved in heaven. Number two, we have sacred sufficiency. And number three, we don't need to earn enoughness. During our last time together, we looked at the 4 reasons why you are enough. Let's review those real quick. Reason number 1 is that you are created by God. Reason number 2, you are created by God in His image. Reason number 3, you belong to God. And reason number 4 is that God approves of you. So today we are going to discover 10 symptoms, and obviously there are many more than this, but 10 will be enough for us to just explore why or how EDD might show up in our lives. So let's jump right into the 10 C's of EDD. Number 1, constant comparison. This is a pervasive habit where you measure your worth, your achievements, your possessions against others. This often leads to feelings of inadequacy or envy. You can also compare others against either yourself or against a third party. This manifests as constantly checking social media for updates on people's successes. It can manifest as a need to keep up with the Joneses. Research suggests that social comparison, especially upward comparison, negatively impacts your self-esteem and your well-being. Number 2, chronic criticism. This is an internal or external dialogue with a very sharp tongue and is characterized by harsh judgment of yourself and of others. And you focus on what you perceive as flaws or mistakes or as shortcomings. So this inner critic will relentlessly point out what you aren't or what you haven't achieved, rather than acknowledging the strengths or progress. You may have had an experience with a teacher or a parent that seemed impossible to please. There was always something for them to pick at or point at. The third one is compulsive control. This is a painful one for a lot of people. It's an overwhelming need to manage every aspect of your life, or a specific aspect of your life, or the environment, or the behavior of others. It stems from a fear of unpredictability or perceived inadequacy, that things won't go exactly as planned. It can manifest as micromanagement, as perfectionism, or an inability to delegate. What does that look like? You ask your child to load the dishwasher, and then you come back after they're done and you redo the whole thing. At work, you can hand somebody a task to take care of, and then partway through you take it back, and you just kind of take the process over. Another example of this control behavior is when you're more concerned about other people's behavior or appearance or health or whatever status than they are themselves. The desire for control often arises from a belief that one's worth is tied to flawless execution or outcomes. And the sad reality in this case is that sometimes even perfection is not good enough. The fourth symptom I'd like us to talk about is conditional self-worth. And what this looks like is you believe that your value as a person is contingent upon external achievements or approval from others, or from meeting external standards. And that means that enoughness is not an inherent state, but it's something that must be earned through performance, excuse me, or external validation. So for example, you only feel worthy when you receive praise, or when you achieve a professional or a personal milestone, or you only feel worthy if you're in a relationship with somebody else, or you're only worthy if you have a child. Another example of this is parents who drive a child to achievements that the child is not even interested in, or to pursue professional lines that they're not interested in, but you're interested in them, so you drive them to that. Excuse me. So point number 5 is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing. This is a cognitive distortion. And what it is you would then have the tendency to anticipate the worst possible outcome in any given situation. And what you do is you blow minor setbacks out of proportion. When you catastrophize, you are making a mountain out of a molehill. And any imperfection is seen as a sign of fundamental unworthiness. So for example, imagine that you are in high school and that during a presentation you experience stage fright. That high schooler might think that they're not very smart, when in reality, people are very empathetic about that. This kid might go through high school constantly thinking of that failure. Other people completely got over it or don't even think of that anymore. So that would be catastrophizing. Point number 7, symptom 7, conformity. Conformity, this is one that I've struggled with. It is a strong inclination to suppress your true self or your opinions or your desires in order to fit in or to gain approval or to avoid rejection. Now, I grew up in a shaming culture, and I've had to work very hard to combat this, and constantly I'm doing that. Conformity indicates a belief that your authentic self is not enough or that it's not acceptable. And so that leads you to a constant need to adapt to external expectations. You learn to be all things to all people. You learn to read the room so you can respond accordingly. And this is, again, particularly prevalent in social or professional settings where perceived norms dictate behavior. Number 8, a constant craving for more. So this is an insatiable desire for more possessions, more achievements, more recognition, more experiences. And it's driven by a belief that more will lead to a feeling of contentment or enoughness. So craving is foundational to addiction. And I describe it at length in my book, Napping in Delilah's Lap. And I'm going to leave a link to that in the comments. Sadly, it is a never-ending cycle, craving is, whereby the satisfaction that you derive from the external gains is very fleeting, and then it leaves you back to craving more. Point number 8, chronic complaining. Complaining, a persistent expression of dissatisfaction. Now, complaining can be directed at yourself or your circumstances or at somebody else. Now, what's interesting about this habit of complaining is that it is marked by a disinterest in actively seeking solutions or acknowledging positive aspects. It's almost as though the complainer sees the complaining as the solution to the problem. We'll notice too that complainers will rarely speak to people who can do something about it. They speak to other people who will just agree with them. And again, have that be the solution. So this is a manifestation of feeling perpetually less than or a victim of circumstances. And we know that that can be empowering to feel like a victim. Sadly, it gives a false sense of empowerment and it reinforces a sense of inadequacy. Number 9, cowering from challenge. Cowering from challenge. And this symptom manifests as avoidance behavior. You avoid new experiences, you avoid taking risks, you avoid opportunities for growth due to an underlying fear of failure, judgment, or not being good enough to succeed. I remember experiencing that in Washington, D.C. when I didn't want to hop on a little scooter. I was concerned about my safety. So what can happen is that this leads to stagnation and a reluctance to step outside your comfort zone. Sadly, it reinforces the belief that you are incapable. And the fear of not measuring up can be a paralyzing fear. Point number 10, finally, closed offness, especially an emotional closed offness. When you are closed off, you have a tendency to suppress or hide your true emotions, your vulnerabilities, or your struggles from others, often out of fear of being judged, being rejected, or being seen as weak. So this stems from a belief that showing imperfection or neediness would expose your lack of enoughness, would expose your EDD, leading to isolation and lack of genuine connection. So it's this vicious cycle. So people who are closed off view vulnerability as a weakness rather than a strength. You may come across as not caring. And this impression of apathy will stem from an internal struggle with inadequacy rather than a genuine lack of empathy or concern. You are actually empathetic, you are actually concerned, but you're coming across as just the opposite. So your behaviors on the surface make you appear indifferent or disengaged. This is a fascinating protective mechanism and a way to shield yourself from perceived failure or judgment. So for example, if you believe that your efforts will never be sufficient, you just withdraw from situations where your performance is evaluated. And other people will misinterpret this as a lack of interest or a lack of effort or again, a lack of caring. Now, what's fascinating is how sometimes you may even make fun of those who are trying. So this withdrawal can be a result of perfectionism. You have this fear of not meeting an impossibly high standard, and so you choose to self-protect by procrastinating, by avoiding, by giving the impression of apathy, by mocking those who are actually doing the work. And the other piece that's interesting about being closed off is how it relates to emotional regulation. So if you have EDD, you might struggle to express your true feelings, especially those that have to do with vulnerability or a need. So you fear revealing your struggles, you fear asking for help, and think that that will be perceived as inadequacy, right? We all know the guy or the lady with the stoic or detached demeanor. They lead with distance. They suppress their emotions to maintain an outward appearance of competence or self-sufficiency. And this emotional suppression is then seen by others and interpreted as lack of caring for the situation or for other people who are involved. What's fascinating, furthermore, is the constant internal battle with just self-doubt. And this closed offness is exhausting, and it leads to a reduced capacity for outward emotional expression or engagement. Again, it's seen as indifference. So there are those 10 symptoms. If you can think of any more, please put them in the comments. All these symptoms of EDD are obviously a very complex interplay of self-protection, self-preservation, of perfectionism, emotional suppression, all the things, right? And what they result in is this overwhelming burden of internal inadequacy that drives external behavior. They impede our capacity to show up as the powerful people that we are and that we're called to be. And they undercut our identity as those who rule and reign alongside of God. And that's what makes this really powerful and important work for us to engage in and wrestle with, because again, it shows up in every aspect of our life, shows up in our relationships, shows up in our parenting, in our marriages, in our work, in our community. And so if we are going to self-lead, we need to identify symptoms of EDD in our own lives, and then we need to tackle them. So when we get together next time, we are going to look at, I'm looking at my calendar, I'll be sure we're going to look at some common causes of EDD in our life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Again, please subscribe and think of people in your life. Think of 3 people right now who manifest one or another or are struggling with these symptoms of EDD, and share this post with them. And lastly, write in the comments which of these you're going to nab and focus on, because it's the one that's most affecting your life. I look forward to continuing to grow with you in overcoming enoughness deficit disorder. I'm Hannah Thukukolowainen, and I'll see you next time.